Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Art of Podcast. I'm Bradley.
I'm Charles.
And today we're handling a big topic, Israel-Palestine and their history. I don't know if this is so much of a historical discussion or a debate on who's. I'm sure it's going to be a combination.
It has to be both. We definitely have to talk about the historical context of it.
So we've laughed about video games. We've laughed about conspiracy theories. We've made fun of Trump and Trudeau. And now we're talking about this. This is kind of
very serious. Yeah. I'm nervous for this.
To open up the blinds a bit into our situation, this is the last one before we launch, where it's like this is one of the ones that shows no hold barred. We'll
it's
talk
like
about
this, and I wanted to have this and abortion.
Yeah, I think this one even more so though is like.
You think?
I think that this is because people have opinions on abortion that don't really need to be baked in statistics or anything or history.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So this is heavier. This is heavier.
For sure. It's you have to know your stuff.
You can't just sit down and have an intelligent conversation about Israel.
Really, because it's not an opinionated thing.
So,
like, you need to know facts if you want to actually talk about it.
Often you and me prepare a page of notes each or whatever or something like that. And like you have 4 very finely written. I have 6. I have an article on my phone.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're not.
That's good. It's good though. I'm glad we're going to be well read.
How much time do you think you spent reading and researching this?
Like in terms of hours, probably. I don't know. I go on lots of tangents in my head.
Yeah.
Like my brain is chaos sometimes, but probably
give a range. Yeah.
I don't know. Anywhere from 6 to 8 hours.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay. Similar. Yeah. I was gonna say like 5 to
like
8 or something.
Like a work day type thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not to mention, you and me are fairly. I don't mean intellectual in like a humble brag way, but like we've thought about it before. It's not like we have this opinion because social media said, right? We're critical thinkers.
Oh, for sure. Well, it's like, I gotta say, like, doing research for this, finding unbiased information on this topic is actually really difficult. Yeah. Like, it's, I watched videos, I read articles, and some were just so blatantly on one side and not get, like, I would say, look, both sides have committed atrocities, right? And I would say, an article or a video is completely biased and full of shit if they don't at least acknowledge some of the atrocities from the side that they're supporting.
And
right?
Taking all this into consideration too is most articles they're reading were probably American, based on us being in Canada and North America.
Yeah.
So, and they are definitely on one side, right? So,
I feel like even in North America it's pretty split because you have the
I guess nowadays
the general you have the social justice left that's very pro Palestine, and then you have the pro Jewish people, and then democracy people that are generally kind of, or pro Western people that are generally pretty pro Israel. So it's like it's pretty split even here in North America.
So I guess to start, we're kind of saying, like, are you on a side?
Yeah. My inclination before doing research was to lean slightly towards Israel. Yeah. But I gotta say, since doing research, it's even more muddied. Like, I'm not going to pick a side. Yeah. I have no dog in this fight, right? We're not Jewish, we're not Palestinian, we're not Muslim. But
by the end of this, we should ask this question again and see too if discussing it.
Sure, that's a good idea. Yeah. That's a good idea.
I would say that I lean Israel, but I do agree. When I was like researching this, it's depending on what your datum is, the year your datum is when you start referring to things, it drastically sways it, right? Because you have Hamas, and then you have Israel just taking land grabs, and then you have the Palestinians not wanting to cede any ground to this Israel state after the the Ottoman Empire. Like it just keeps on going, right? And it's like even though that they were legally, according to international law, had to.
Right. Well, it's tricky, really, when you look at which side has historical claims to the land, right? Because how your opinion on that depends on how far back in history you want to go, and the further back in history you go, the more complicated things get, right? Like you could say I don't know, archaeological evidence of Jewish people kind of settling the area in the Iron Age, which was 1200 BC. That's pretty solid. But then you had a pretty long period of Muslim rule in the area, right? So it's who owns the land, right? It's a complicated question. And
I don't mean to even this sounds sort of disregarding of it, but like to add more complication to it, it's like you have two peoples that are at war with each other in the Middle East, and if the Muslims have claim to everything, it's like, do you have to, like, for the safety of the Jewish people, give them somewhere that is homeland?
I mean,
as a homeland, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just arguments.
The argument is that the Jewish people need a homeland, right? And because they have such deep religious ties to the Levant and to Israel, like, I mean, that's probably the best place to put them, looking at it that way. But then now the obvious issue is, like, you had people here before then, right? And so it's like, what do you do with those people? And this is exactly what's happening right now. It's making it a really complicated situation. I'd also say I'm pro-Israel for that reason too, of they kind of need somewhere that's safe. But then the issue is they're not letting any Muslim people leave easily and stuff too, right? Like there's a bunch of there's that whole apartheid thing. Have you heard about that?
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that because I'm South African, so apartheid is literally part of my ancestry. Not racist. Staying a fact here. There's that argument a lot I see of where Israel is committing apartheid on the Palestinian people. The only thing I want to say about that, there's obviously, whenever you talk about apartheid, you're going to have connections to South Africa, right? And what I would say is, if you're going to accuse Israel of being guilty of apartheid, you have to differentiate between the legal definition of apartheid and what happened in South Africa.
What happened. The title of an event, right?
Yeah.
Not an event.
Well, I mean, what happened in South Africa, right? Like, is what Israel is committing either partially or fully meeting the definition of apartheid? I think so, right? If it's partially or fully, that's up to a debate. To some extent, they are committing apartheid, right? Is what's happening in Israel exactly like what happened in South Africa? No, it's not. So you have to be careful making the comparison, right? Like there are still places in the Levant where the Palestinian Authority has full governmental and security control, right? There was never that was never a thing in South Africa. There was never an enclave. There was never a single enclave in South Africa where black people could go to and govern themselves, right? So it's not a direct comparison. What happened in South Africa is not what's happening in Israel. So I would say,
and isn't Israel more of a case? Isn't like the Muslims living there? How are they treated? That was something I was having trouble. Like what I kept reading was just Israel wouldn't let them leave because it would ruin the economy. And
no, it's way worse. It's way worse than that. It's way worse because they're in particular in East Jerusalem, they're forcing Muslims out of their homes. Like they're literally like dragging Muslims.
But then they won't let them leave the country, right? Like that's the thing, is they're not letting a lot of them leave the country.
Look, I mean, it depends on which direction you go. If you're a Palestinian and you leave from if you leave from East Jerusalem to the West Bank, that's an easy thing to do because obviously Israel wants less Muslims and less Palestinians in East Jerusalem. If you're a Palestinian and you move from the West Bank to Gaza, that's also an easy thing to do because Israel wants less Palestinians in the West Bank. But if you're in Gaza and you want to go to West Bank, or if you're in the West Bank and you want to go to East Jerusalem as a Palestinian, that's almost impossible to do. Which is actually part of the definition of apartheid. Right? So so Israel is in a lot of cases forcing Palestinians out of their homes and
to either stay here or don't go here.
Exactly. So it's that does fit to some extent the definition of apartheid. It's way worse than just not letting them come back. It's and then you have the whole issue of like I've heard stories of the IDF engaging I mean, if you're fighting against people with guns and other weapons, that's different. But I have heard stories of like Palestinian children being killed by IDF members. Right. So it's like there's that.
But then there's whole other layers to that with the Hamas.
Actually,
we'll get into, right? Do you want to get on all that now, or do you want to kind of go over the history of it and get our basis?
Let's go do the history first.
This history being kind of like 20th century, right? Because predating that, you have an area where you had Christian crusades trying to come in there. They failed a bunch. You had Muslims kind of controlled the land for the Ottoman Empire So 13th century or 1300s, 14th century.
I have it in my notes here.
Yeah, me too. But like almost 1,000 years. At that point,
it's over 1,000 years. Well,
no, Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire was 700 years.
Okay, I mean, I would start the history before that. I mean, I would start it in the Iron Age because that's when archaeological findings start to line up with like Israel and Judea being states.
Yeah.
Right. So now that anchors. I mean, Bronze Age Israel, like Exodus, Moses, all that stuff. That's difficult to confirm because not a lot of archaeological evidence kind of supports that. But the Iron Age, so 900 to 700 BC is what I have here in my notes. That's when a pretty clear Jewish connection starts to become established in the Levant, and then 634 AD, so almost 1,000 years, or almost 2,000 years later, that's when the region was conquered by Arabs, and then the Arab-Israeli conflict begins then.
And it pretty much continues indefinitely.
Literally indefinitely. So.
And then you have the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
In the 1300s or something like that. We'll say the 1300s. I can't remember. It's pretty dangerous.
Well, the Ottoman Empire went right all the way up to World War One.
Yeah, and so started in the.
I don't know when it started. Do you know when it started?
Yeah. It started. I can Google it.
Sure.
1 sec. Keep talking.
What do I talk about? I don't know. Can we both agree that maybe the Allied powers at the end of World War One didn't handle the situation too well? Having to split up the Middle East into a bunch of just arbitrarily drawn. They could have handled it better for sure.
Yeah, Ottoman Empire start. It's good to have the dates here. 13th century, at the very end of the 13th century, so we can call it 1300, I guess.
That's a long time, man. Holy shit. From 1300 all the way up to
the end
early
of
1900? Yeah, that's crazy.
Ended in 1299,
mm-hmm.
and it ended 1922. So... Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, you keep going through your timeline then, because you have the early stuff. Or is that it?
No, that's all I had for the early stuff. It's just I just wanted to emphasize there is an Iron Age connection to the Jewish people and the Levant. That's as far back as we can realistically go with archaeological evidence, and then after that. Almost 2,000 years after that, then the Arab influence started coming in.
The Arab influence is a couple thousand years.
So
now you have this mess. Yeah.
So I mean, this is the issue of time frames. Obviously, I just wanted to establish that
That's what we're saying. That's what I was saying, right? Depending on when you mark it, and in the early 20th century, things get weird again too, right? Depending on exactly when you want to start. Is it the British Empire trying to make a compromise? Is it them just saying I give up, and then Israel saying fine, we're doing this ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Because there was kind of several things that happened here, and I'm trying to pull up the timeline site again here so we can do that. If you want to talk about World War I and II, I'll get the timeline.
Sure.
Okay.
So World War I ended. The Ottoman Empire was abolished, so England and France had to split up the empire. They created a state called British Palestine, which is pretty much Israel as it is right now.
Yeah.
There were Jewish people in British Palestine. The Jewish people had basically stubbornly kept a presence in the area ever since they were invaded by the Arabs.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not like they just left.
Yeah.
Jewish people were there. They started immigrating more and more to British Palestine, and then caused more conflict with the local Arabs. And then after World War II, that's when the UN divided the area into a Jewish state for Israel and an Arab state for Palestine.
But the UN didn't actually do it. They drew up plans, and it was never agreed upon. And
no, I think it was agreed
initially.
upon.
It was from here. Okay, we have my...
Well, it was agreed upon initially, but then literally 2 years later, they had the Arab-Israeli war, and then Israel kind of went to town on
the amount.
They kind of took some areas from Palestine.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah. No,
do we want to finish out the history first, or do you want to go through the whole timeline, or
I can just kind of skim it, right?
Okay.
So 1900 to 1917, Zionism and early Jewish immigration to Israel, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where people started coming back to their ancestral home, right? Because for the longest time they were forced out of it.
Right.
1915 to 1916, British encourages Arab uprising against the Ottoman Empire. That would be in regards to World War I, right?
Yeah.
The same. And then Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire in 1916. There's a bunch of smaller ones. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire during World War I. League of Nations divides former Ottoman territories into mandates. 1920 and 1922, which is what you were saying, right? The League of Nations divides the territory formerly under Ottoman.
The League of Nations is the predecessor to the UN, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Into new entities called mandates. The mandates would be administered like trusts by the British and French under supervision of the League until such time that the inhabitants were believed by League members to be ready for independence and self-government. The mandate territories were Syria and Lebanon, awarded to France, Iraq awarded to Britain, and new entities called Palestine, which was also placed under British control. Out of the broad region known as Palestine, Britain carved two political entities in 1921. One entity consisted east of the Jordan River and named it I don't even want to try to say that. Jordan. Named it later named it Jordan.
Okay.
In the western half between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River, Palestine Arabs and Zionist Jews wrestled for control under the British umbrella. So they did split it into two there, right?
Right.
Mass Jewish immigration after Nazis gained power happened too, which is a whole other angle to take.
Yeah.
The second biggest group, isn't that the second highest concentration of Jews were there at the time or something like that?
In Germany?
Or some high, whatever, I don't, maybe I shouldn't say this without remembering, but some high concentration after trying to leave.
Right.
Right? And then Jewish persecution of the Holocaust, Arab revolt in Palestine against the British Mandate, which happened in 1936 to 1939. So we're now approaching World War II. World War II and Jewish resistance to British Mandate. So the Jews attacked British troops. They wanted everything, I think, was what it was, right? And the Arabs didn't want them to have anything.
Sorry, Jewish people wanted everything?
I think they wanted the whole territory.
Yeah.
And then, but the Arabs also wanted the whole territory because
I
have notes written down about that you had here. So Israel made a statement. So when they were drawing up the plans, the League of Nations suggested two states with Jerusalem as an international city, right? So Jerusalem was supposed to be a city owned between these two states.
It was a special international zone. I don't know if it was actually owned by anyone.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe administrated by the UN
by
or
both,
or like
by the UN or something, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then the Jews voted, but the Islam was against, right?
What I heard was that after the Arab-Israeli War in, I think, 1948, Israel expanded its territory into Palestine, and part of that was taking West Jerusalem. So they literally took West Jerusalem under their control and then ignored the international special zone. And then Palestine was like, okay, well, if you got West Jerusalem, then we'll just take East Jerusalem then.
Didn't Britain give up? I don't think it was officially split yet, though. 1948 was when it split. Britain...
what do I have here? I have here, in 1947, UN borders allocated much more... Oh, no, wait. In 1948, all surrounding Arab countries declared war on Israel to establish a unified Arab state where British Palestine had been. Israel won the war, but in the process, it expanded its borders into Palestine and established the current borders of today. Israel expelled large numbers of Palestinians from their homes, resulting in hundreds of thousands of refugees.
Sure. Okay. Either way, though, there was issues drawing the land borders. Right, like the idea of there being an east and west, and then Jerusalem being an international city, was voted for by the Jews and against by the.
Okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Okay, interesting.
But kind of makes sense and kind of The one that doesn't have anything wants something, and the one that has everything wants to keep it, right? Which is frustrating.
Look,
but
I don't want to fault Britain here because I think that they were just trying to make the best of a bad situation.
Well, and they were tasked with solving it.
Yeah,
That's the thing too. They were told by the international community, by the League of Nations, League of Legends, as well as say the League of Nations.
The League of Legends.
They were just saying, here you have to deal with it. They were given the mess you just want to deal with. I think largely, like every other, like here France deal with Syria, right? Like I'm sure it's own mess, right? But then Britain deal with this like the most hotly contested area of land in the history of the world.
Right. Can we talk about that?
Okay.
So, the Jerusalem is the center of this entire conflict.
Yeah.
Right. Just because of what Jerusalem represents.
Yeah.
Right. Like
it's a symbol of it all, right?
It's a symbol of okay. You know how much I like Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
He has a 12-minute video online about Israel-Palestine, and he talks about Jerusalem a lot specifically. And you know how he is, like he's so compelling.
Yeah.
So what he says here about Jerusalem, he just talks about the significance of the city and why, to your point, it is literally like just the messiest place in the entire world to try to do.
Oh, totally. It is. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He says here, all three Abrahamic religions agree that Jerusalem represents the holy city predicated on the ultimate value, i.e. God.
Yeah.
A city that's walled in and surrounded by chaos. It's the ideal state. It's the hope for the future. It's the utopia. It's heaven on earth. It's paradise. It's Eden reestablished. And it's the vision of humanity. He says, Israel and Jerusalem is a microcosm of the human longing for return of paradise, where Muslims, Jews, and Christians are all painfully forced to confront each other at the deepest level of reality.
Yeah, that's intense.
That's intense.
That
right?
is intense.
Yeah, no, it's like...
And that's his quote, like verbatim?
Verbatim, that's his quote. Yeah, I mean, I probably paraphrased it a little bit,
yeah,
but no, that's essentially what he said. And it's like... I love the guy, man.
I find it. I was talking. Sorry, really quick tangent.
Sure,
I've been listening to him more recently.
Oh, yeah.
And I enjoy his older stuff more. He's so
100%.
Like, now, he's so verbose, right? His words are bigger.
Yeah.
He's being more abstract, and it's so much harder to figure out what he's trying to say.
I think he's becoming senile, which is sad for me.
Yeah.
I really
you think he is. You think that's what it is?
I think he's becoming kind of senile, dude. Because I agree. If you compare his older videos, like especially pre-2016 to now, dude, I rewatched his Kathy Newman interview the other day.
Yeah, and he was
on the fucking money,
and it was like mechanical.
Exactly.
Him taking apart every single one of her arguments, and his ability to recall what he said 40 minutes ago verbatim, and be like, you're wrong. This is what.
And the tangents, dude. He didn't have that. He had a few tangents because that's his style of talking, but it wasn't so excessively drawn out. And it's look, I really like the guy, but I think he's becoming kind of senile, and it makes me really sad because I think it just adds to people's criticism of him.
Yeah,
which I think
because he was so. I mean, he's well spoken still, but he was so precise. Like it was, like I said, mechanical, right?
I think the fame and just the stress of
when he disappeared for about a year, right? Kind of like that's the point.
Well, I mean, the guy almost died, right? Yeah. So he's been going through a lot, and you can definitely tell that's taken a toll on him, especially if you kind of view his content in a timeline. Yeah. Right. So it makes me sad that he's kind of starting to go a little bit. But
it's
anyway. Regardless of what you think about him, he's an incredibly insightful guy.
So
there we go.
I pulled this up in this timeline that I had, by the way, which kind of answers what we were saying earlier. 1947, the United Nations General Assembly voted 33 to 13 in the partition of Western Palestine into two states, one for the Jews, one for the Palestinian Arabs. Okay, I'm kind of paraphrasing here.
Yeah.
The Zionists, so the Jews, voted for it and accepted it, even though they always dreamed of controlling all of it. Right? They accepted the half. They were okay with that.
Right.
The Palestinian Arabs and the surrounding Arab states rejected the partition proposal. They felt Palestine was all theirs, and the Jews were foreign implants foisted upon them, and that they had the strength to drive them out.
Does it say what those 13 countries opposed to it were?
No, I'm sure we could find it. Yeah, but so then 1948, Jewish forces attacked the Palestinian village of something, whatever. I'm going to skip ahead now again. So then also May 14th, 1948, Israel declares its independence. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there's so many names I don't want to try to say. And they declare their independence from the Palestine, and they called themselves the State of Israel. The Declaration of Independence pledged that the State of Israel would be based on the principles of liberty, justice, and peace as convened by the prophets of Israel, would uphold the full social and political equality of all citizens without distinction to religion, race, or sex, and would loyally uphold the principles of the UN Charter. It specified promised equal rights to the Arab inhabitants of the State of Israel and extended the hand of peace to all neighboring Arab states. One day later, the Arab-Israel war breaks out.
1 day. 24 hours.
Probably less, because that was announced at 4 p.m. Yeah,
it's worth mentioning here that the Arab nations instigated.
They launched that attack.
They were the ones who declared.
On the eve of May 14th, the Arabs launched an air attack, which the Israelis resisted. This action was followed by the invasion of the former Palestinian Mandate by Arab armies from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Egypt. So within a day, they were like,
"Fuck
nope.
you, Israel!" And then what happened? David and Goliath. Israel kicked their butt.
Oh yeah, I want to get to that
Absolutely
too.
Destroyed.
So then, within the next year, 700,000 Palestinians became refugees. Israel signs the armistice agreement a year later. Another year later, and the conflict continues between Arabs and Israelites. Suez Canal crisis, which, did you hear about that too? So Egypt was said that Israel ships were not allowed to use the Suez Canal.
Ooh, I know.
So Israel attacked Egypt to try to make them...
Was this part of the Arab-Israeli War?
In the greater grand scheme of things, 1956. Second Arab-Israel War erupts.
Okay.
In the early 1950s, Egypt violated the terms of the Egyptian-Israeli Armistice Agreement and blocked Israeli ships from passing through the Suez Canal, a major international waterway. It also began to block traffic through the Straits of Tiran, a narrow passage of water linking Israel's port of Eilat to the Red Sea. This action effectively cut off the port of Eilat, Israel's sole outlet to the Red Sea and to the Indian Ocean. At the same time, Palestinian Arab Fedayeen launched cross-border infiltrations and attacks on Israel civilian centers and military outposts from Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. 1956, Israel began assaults on Egyptian military positions, capturing the whole of the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula. On October 31st, France and Britain joined the fray, and hostilities ended November 5th. Pretty quick after heavy European forces joined in. The U.S. was caught completely by surprise and voiced strong opposition to the joint attack. The U.S. pressured Israel to withdraw from Egyptian territory. United Nations forces were stationed along the Egyptian-Israeli border to prevent Egyptian blockades and deter cross-border infiltration.
That's good for people who are so incessantly anti-American about fucking everything. It's pretty good to hear that, like, the U.S. actually participated in, like, de-escalating things at a pretty serious time, right?
Although, you have to, like, not blame Israel completely in that either. Like, right?
Okay, look, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Israel has been... We have that time period between the Arab-Israeli wars and then the Six-Day War, right? Although Israel has definitely been very expansionist and expanding its territory into Palestine, but you can't ignore the fact that the surrounding Arab countries instigated all of those conflicts.
Well, even that one there was Egypt saying, nope, we're blocking the canal again, even though we just signed an agreement 3 years ago or whatever it was that said we won't. We're now infiltrating military bases. Right. It's like, what's Israel going to do?
Exactly.
Right.
So it just makes it more complicated. Like, pre-war, Israel wants peace. They're being not pacifist, but they're looking for peace. Post-war, after war has been declared on them, then they become more expansionist. So it's like, it's complicated, but you can't just fault Israel there. Because they had, in the time span of, 20, 30 years, they had 3 wars instigated on them. Entirely. Yeah. Right? Like,
so, then that leads to the Six-Day War in 1967, which is the David and Goliath, this is Sparta moment. Right. They had several wars like that, but this is the one. So this one, and this is the info I wrote down. It was Israel versus the combined militaries of Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Lebanon.
As in every single surrounding country.
Every single one. And all of those 10 times the size of Israel, like geographically. Okay, Israel had 50,000 troops active, 214,000 in reserve, 300 aircraft, 800 tanks. So, in total, they had 264,000 troops, of which 100,000 were deployed. Okay? Egypt deployed 240,000 troops. Syria, Jordan, and Iraq, 307,000. They had 2,500 tanks, 1,000 aircraft. Saudi Arabia had 20,000 troops. So in total, they had, so to compare, 300 aircraft to 1,000 aircraft, 800 tanks to 2,500 tanks.
Israel's first?
Israel's first. So smaller numbers every time.
Right.
264,000 deployed to 567,000 deployed.
Wow.
Troops total. 100,000 deployed to 240,000 deployed. Israel had 800 deaths, 4,500 wounded. They lost 400 tanks and 46 aircraft. Egypt lost 10 to 15,000 troops killed.
Just Egypt.
4,000 captured. Jordan had 7,000 killed, 2,500 wounded, 5,000 captured. Syria, 2,500 killed, 500 captured. Hundreds of tanks lost, and 450 aircraft destroyed, compared to the 46 aircraft Israel had destroyed.
Oh my god. Dude, regardless of what side you're on, you gotta commend Israel
insane.
For that shit.
So,
man. That is some crazy
The war
stuff.
started, so Israel attacked preemptively because Egypt started closing the canal again and started placing all the troops along the border.
Which is an instigation.
And signed an agreement with Jordan that if they were to attack, Jordan would gain support.
Right.
So the pieces are falling in place. So Israel attacked preemptively.
Okay.
The war started June 5th. And by June 8th, Egypt and Jordan both requested a ceasefire.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
3 days, man.
And then Syria on the 9th. And then on the 11th, the total ceasefire was called.
That's insane.
The words by military strategists were, Israel completely crippled the entirety of Egypt, Syria's, and Jordan's military power.
Holy shit.
It is, no matter what side you're on, that is a historic.
Now, look, obviously.
That's without the States, Britain.
Okay, well, so currently, Israel obviously gets a lot of military support from the US. Do you know what their sort of military makeup was like at that time in relation to the US? Like, was the US helping them a lot during the...
They didn't have, guarantees. That was them.
So was there American training in Israel by that time? Did they have lots of Western equipment?
You can't say equipment because the other side had a lot of Soviet equipment.
Okay.
That was almost all Soviet tanks.
Right.
So even if the U.S. is helping to a small degree, that's...
In terms of training, though, because that's what I'm curious
training
about.
Would be the big one.
There has to be some...
When did the U.S.
Your soldiers have to be insanely competent to inflict that kind of damage on everyone around you and suffer relatively minimal losses.
Training Israel. When did the U.S. start training Israel? 1984, so that was afterwards.
Oh, so Israel kind of did that on its own?
Yeah.
Dude,
against
Soviet-backed
Arab, 6 Soviet-backed Arab countries.
Look, I'm trying not to be too side picky here, but I gotta commend them for that.
Yeah, that is incredible. Yeah.
That is incredible.
And that's going into the whole IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, right? They have that Muay Thai thing where it's how to kill as a killer mime as
martial arts,
effectively as possible in close quarters. And they're all trained, they all have force training, conscription. It might be the most well trained average group of soldiers. You might have more elite. You have your SAS and Navy SEALs and all that. But as far as a base troop goes, I wonder how they rack up. I bet you it's one of the most. Yeah, and they have to be. They're outnumbered 10-1 and they managed to win.
They're surrounded by hostiles. Yeah. I mean, well, I gotta say, so after the 6-Day War, it turned into less of an Arab-Israeli conflict and more of an Israeli-Palestinian conflict because the surrounding countries around Israel,
Egypt and Israel actually kind of chill with each other now, right? In many ways.
Oh, pretty much all the I think actually.
I'm just speaking of that because I know
all the surrounding countries are relatively chill with Israel. At least
we're saying chill so we avoid any particulars of being wrong. Relatively chill.
Look, on a diplomatic level, right? On a more personal level, I went to school with a lot of Arabic people from the Middle East, and pretty much all of them were like, "Fuck Israel, I hate Israel."
But they're also
But as far as diplomacy goes, and as far as international relations go, the surrounding countries, the countries surrounding Israel are on much better terms.
Israel also has the Iron Dome going on in Jerusalem now, and has don't they have nuclear guarantees from the States too?
Probably.
I think they do. So now it's okay, you guys can't take our land. Don't try this time, right? we messed you guys up last time, and this time we have.
Well, I mean, yeah. There's also just there's the issue of just world order, right? Like, a lot of these Arab states, I think pretty much all of them have ties to the U.S.
And it is more globalized now. The world is infinitely
so it's like, in
2020.
2020, you don't want a Russia and Ukraine happening. You don't want one of these countries to declare war on Israel and then the U.S. to come in and be like, hey, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want that. And people know that. Countries know that, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, I think that's something, I think that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
I think people shit on the U.S. for being a world superpower, but I think a very positive side effect of that is that they kind of maintain world peace.
They're the world police force, essentially, is how I've heard it described, right? And people crap on that and criticize that. But when you have superpowers, something has to hold them in check. And would you rather have the U.S. holding everyone in check, or China, or Russia, right? Like, those are the three options you have. I mean, Russia not so much anymore.
Well, Russia's the more obvious one. It's like, because Putin's fucking crazy, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, even... Yeah, no, I obviously I would side with the U.S. there as Western. But
I think any sane person in the Western world, I think even a lot of non-Westerners would probably make a claim.
Yeah,
ask Taiwan right now, and ask
even
Japan, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, China's really kind of stirring up some.
Even the whole South Pacific, all of those countries, I think
pretty much all of them.
All of them would be like, yep, U.S. Like, I think you would be hard pressed to find a large subsect of people in. I would hope you'd have trouble finding a large subsect of people in the Western world that would say they would rather the U.S.
Anyway, it's not about China.
Yeah.
But,
I think we'll probably do a podcast.
We'll probably do a China
that
one. Yeah, for sure.
So.
Where were we?
That was the history. So that was the 6-Day War, and then after that you're kind of getting into I don't think there's any major significant event that I saw there, but you did until Hamas comes in. I guess you had in the 90s.
There were what are they called? The infayadas or the...
Yeah.
No, that's not what they're called.
I know what you're saying, though.
Yeah. Intifadas. The intifadas. Yeah.
When was that?
There were a couple, I think.
Okay. You want to talk about that then?
What do I have in my notes here? So, Hamas was founded in 1987... in opposition to the Palestinian Liberation Organization.
Yeah. Sorry, who was?
What?
What did you say? Read that one more time.
Hamas was founded in 1987.
Was it that old? Wow.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
They were founded founded as a violent extremist organization that sought the total destruction of Israel. They're only located in Gaza and split from the Palestinian Liberation Organization in the West Bank for being too compromising. So there's the PLO. There's people call them Fatah too, because Fatah is the political party in the West Bank. So we have we'll call it Fatah. You have Hamas in Gaza. And you have Fatah in the West Bank. And Fatah is much more compromising. Fatah seeks a two-state solution, right? They don't seek the destruction of Israel. They want to come to some kind of compromise.
Yeah.
Hamas is the opposite. Hamas seeks the total destruction of Israel. And Hamas and Fatah actually fought a civil war at one point because they disagreed with each other.
Well, Hamas started as a military group, right? It was like a military group, political party kind of thing. Kind of. Like I'm kind of maybe simplifying it. But yeah, they strictly say it's a military group with the aim of militarily destroying Israel to make it an Islamic state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like we're going to take them out. Like that's openly what it is. Yeah. Right. They came into power in 2006 in the Gaza Strip though, right? I think that's what I was reading.
No, I have this here. In 2000... Okay.
Sure, okay.
So after the 6-Day War... We forgot to mention this. After the 6-Day War, Israel occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, right? These were areas that were confined to Palestine, and then Israel occupies them. In 2005, Israel withdraws from Gaza, and Hamas takes over.
But not the West Bank.
No.
Well, that's... The West Bank said...
Then you have the Oslo Accords in 1993. Did you do much research?
Not much, but yeah.
Okay, so yes, okay. After the 6-Day War in 1967, Israel occupies the West Bank and Gaza, right? So these areas are under occupation, and that's supported by the thoughts of the international community, right? Then in 1993, the Oslo Accords were signed, which established the Palestinian Authority and gave Palestinians the right to govern themselves in certain regions of the West Bank. Under the Oslo Accords, most of the West Bank is still governed by Israel, and some Palestinian-controlled regions are under Israeli security control. So I saw a map of it. You have the West Bank. Yeah. Israel's blue, right? Most of it was blue, and then you had these little circles everywhere. Some were dark green and some were light green. The dark green are the sort of the enclaves where Palestine has full governmental and security control, and then the light green ones are where Palestine has civil control, but then its security is controlled by Israel. Yeah. So you have sort of a mix and match of all
the
these
West Bank's the really confusing one now. The Gaza Strip was ceded, pulled out of whatever you want to say.
So
in 2005.
Yeah. The Oslo Accords, to my knowledge, the Oslo Accords had nothing to do with Gaza. It was only the West Bank. Yeah. And then because there was so much opposition in Gaza from Hamas, Israel pulled out. And then both Israel and Egypt imposed an economic blockade on Gaza.
And they have the borders continuously watched because of that too.
Oh, there's walls up and shit that have guards towers. Yeah. And I mean, look, man, fair enough, because Hamas likes to make their points with rockets and shit, right? Yeah. So it's like, why the hell wouldn't you go on the defensive there?
So should we talk about Hamas now?
Sure, let's talk about Hamas.
So Hamas is a weird one because Israel has actually more there's more Palestinian civilian casualties than Israeli civilian casualties in that Gaza Strip war, like on either side of the border, right? But when you start looking into it, it's weird, right? Because like that instinctively is like, well, then Israel's the more careless one, right? But Hamas launches rockets from densely packed territories.
Dude, I don't know if you've looked at Gaza on a map on Google Earth, but it's like
options otherwise.
There's not a whole lot of farmland. It's pretty much dense.
But there are sections of city that are fairly abandoned too, compared to other sections. Yeah, okay. And they store munitions in schools with kids in them, like actual schools. They store their missiles.
That's interesting. There. So now, if you're getting mad at Israel, I mean, it's complicated, man, because it's
I'm saying it's like either you bomb that, because those are going to be launched right back at you.
Right.
Or you let them bomb you, and that's going to be civilian.
If you're Hamas and you're intentionally storing these munitions in schools and hospitals, it's like, why are you storing them there? You have so many other places you can store them. It's almost as if they're trying to create a narrative that paints Israel
as... That's the thing.
Right?
There's two possible things. One, they're hoping that Israel wouldn't bomb the schools and they could store them there safely. But that's I'd stretch. Or just hide them. Don't make it known to Israel where your missiles are. right? Like option 2. No, but there are several things that I have it written down here, that they're purposely doing that. To make a narrative that Israel is killing civilians to unite the world against Israel.
Right.
Like there's statements from here. Yeah, I have a quote here. Jeffrey Goldberg, an interviewer, a reporter, interviewed Hamas. I can't read my own writing. Members of Hamas. And he said that Hamas purposely wants Israel to kill civilians to unite the world against them. Mm-hmm. And that is stated from interviewing Hamas members.
Right.
Right? So when you read into it more, it's not just Israel's killing more. It's that there's a legal definition of a human body, human shield, using human shields, and that's a war crime. You're not, in the International War Act, you're not supposed to use human shields.
Yeah.
And that's literally hiding among civilians and shooting and stuff, right?
Right.
And Hamas isn't doing that, but they're doing everything but that, right? They're storing bombs in a school, they're launching rockets from a city plaza, and then escaping, right?
Where did you read that they're storing bombs in schools?
There's a few news articles about it.
Okay, as long as that's
legit. I was reading. I'll confirm that. I don't remember where. I was reading news articles about that in particular, and I wrote that down. Yeah, if that is a lie, I'm sorry. That's what the news articles.
I mean, so many people lie about this conflict, man. It's like,
but it was legitimate news articles.
No, I trust you. I trust you. We're both pretty impartial people that really try to make sure we consume unbiased information. Which
as hard as that was for this.
It was hard. It was really hard.
Yeah, because everything's an editorial too, right? On this,
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed. It was hard to find just like here's the facts. It was all like people's opinions on the facts.
Right, and people have points they want to make, and then if they bring on guests or interview people, it's like you're not going to interview someone or bring someone on as a guest who disagrees with you if you have a point to make.
Yeah.
Right, like you're not being impartial.
Yeah.
There's so much of that shit.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
well, then Hamas also used suicide bombers, right?
Yeah.
And Hamas defends suicide attacks as a legit part of asymmetrical warfare being conducted. So Hamas is like, no, this is fine, even though they're considered a crime against humanity in international law. They're considered a war crime. You can look it up, right? Like that. Yeah. They have mostly stopped recently, but it's not for a lack of willing volunteers. Apparently, still they have volunteers that are willing to be apparently.
Yeah. Okay.
Or due to Israeli security, they stopped using suicide bombers because they noticed that it resulted in targeted attacks in Hamas leadership. But if they start using other tactics, they didn't start. There wasn't specific leadership attacks in Hamas, so they're actually more effective to not use suicide bombers.
Interesting.
Which is kind of that's the douchiest result that right? Like it is, right? Like it's like you could have done it because you had no volunteers.
Right.
Good. No more you're stopping that. Or because Israel's being secure. Yeah. No, you're just doing it because you're dying.
Exactly.
Right? Like the leadership deciding not to do it because their lives are now being put at risk. Right. But like you read it and like they're like, people are all happy to volunteer to do that because we promised them 30,000 virgins or whatever. Like they're literally
72. The exact number is 72. Yeah.
But they were like, we're promising them this and stuff. It's like that martyrdom is one of the ways to be in closer connection or whatever it is, right? Yeah. But it's like martyrdom is like held high among them. I'm not saying them being Muslims in general. I'm saying them being Hamas or terrorist or key sects of it. Look,
right? Here are the countries that list Hamas as a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
Canada, the EU, Israel, Japan, Australia, the US, the UK.
Yeah.
Right? Those are all. I mean, it's not every country. A lot of countries.
Norway doesn't. I know that.
Norway. They're careful about the wording. Yeah. They say that Hamas's military wing is a terrorist organization, but not their political wing. Yeah. Right? It's you have countries using careful language here, but it is designated as a terrorist organization by many major countries. And it's like, fair enough, man. They launch rockets into Israel.
Yeah.
Now, look, to counter that, Israel's response to that usually is to fire rockets into heavily...
Well, it's brute force too, right? They're using overwhelming force is the argument. More than needed.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not a military strategist. Is it more than needed? I don't know. I can't comment on that, right? Like if you're going to fire a rocket into a densely urban area to get a munitions depot or something, like, is there going to be collateral damage? Obviously. I mean, it'd be great if that wasn't a thing, but it'd be great if Hamas wasn't firing rockets into Israel at the time.
Well, here's the thing too: is Israel has actually been known. I shouldn't say, maybe known's not the right word. They've been reported to have actually dropped flyers in the neighborhood that they're going to bomb to warn civilians to leave.
Interesting.
And that they've even called institutes to say.
Okay, that doesn't make sense to me though, because if you're targeting military leadership, why the hell would you do that?
When they're targeting depots, like ammunition depots.
If that's true, then I commend Israel. Yeah. If that's true.
Even if that's true part of the time, I haven't heard of Hamas doing that. And I'm sure it's not a blanket statement of all things, right? But it could be there's a military base here, undercover somewhere. And, sure, even if that results in all the leadership leaving, you're still going to get all the infrastructure, the military infrastructure. Mm-hmm. If it is you need to leave in 3 hours, right? Like you have 3 hours to get out of there, and then there's a bomb being dropped on you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's interesting if that's the case, right? And I read that on a few different articles. So I'm not saying they do that every time, but there's an effort being made at least somewhere.
I would commend Israel if they did. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Trying to minimize collateral damage.
Yeah.
Fine. They're whenever you talk about this conflict, I think you have to draw a distinction between Hamas and the West Bank.
Yeah. Oh, they're
and the
Palestinian different stories there. Yeah.
In my honest opinion, Gaza and Hamas, it's pretty clear there.
Yeah.
It's they're terrorists. They fire rockets into Israel. My understanding mostly is that Israel fires back in response to a rocket attack.
Yeah.
Right? People might argue that the rocket attacks instigated by Hamas are done in response to certain actions performed by Israel, like getting people out of their homes and stuff like an anti-Palestinian event happens.
Yeah.
Hamas in response fires rockets, and then Israel in response fires rockets into Gaza.
But you could chase that back and figure out why is Israel doing that. There might be some stretched reason
So
for
look,
that
it's complicated. To me, it's pretty clear cut. Hamas is a terrorist organization.
Okay.
Right, but the West Bank is where it gets complicated.
So I agree with you, but I want to ask you, what makes you think that Hamas is a terrorist organization and not the group launching the rockets back to the Gaza Strip?
What?
Why do you think Hamas is a terrorist organization? They're not the only ones launching missiles, you know what I mean? So what makes
they're the ones instigating it usually. Yeah. They're the ones who are hell bent on the destruction of Israel.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like you have
Israel ceded the Gaza Strip. They left. They pulled out of the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
In 2005.
I mean, yeah.
So clearly they were like, we're not going to bomb you. We're leaving.
Well, they put in the blockade.
Yeah, but they left but they ceded that. So clearly there probably would have been some if Hamas wasn't that leads me to believe that if Hamas wasn't sending bombs all the time over, that Israel would have blockaded it.
Definitely, I think you're right there, but you also got to wonder symbolically, what does it mean to, Israel is leaving your territory now, that's fine, but now you have walls built up all around your territory and you're under severe economic blockades.
Yeah.
Right? That situation has 100% instigated sort of radical extremism.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's instigated
Not that is a good excuse for that extremism. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean that you're allowed to go bomb.
I agree. It doesn't mean that extremism is justified, especially if it means killing innocent people, which Hamas does.
But it was the catalyst. Yeah.
It was the catalyst. Yeah. Look, it's complicated.
It's
complicated. What I meant by it being clear cut is just, I think, if you're comparing the West Bank to Gaza, right?
Gaza's the worst one. That's the
it's pretty clear that the situation in Gaza is rife with extremism and terrorism.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the West Bank, it's not so clear cut.
It's more of a humanitarian crisis.
Right, because you have let's talk about the West Bank now, because you have plenty of people, political parties included, in the West Bank who want to compromise.
Yeah.
They want a two-state solution. They don't want to be at war with Israel. And Palestinian supporters would say that Israel is being pretty aggressively expansionist, right? They're setting up these settlements in the West Bank, these Jewish-controlled settlements with Jewish security forces, and the international community actually considers these settlements to be illegal. They consider the Israeli people moving into these settlements to be illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
Right? So now we're getting to a gray area of Israel's definitely committing some international crimes here, or crimes, or however you want to phrase it.
Maybe not a crime, I don't know exactly what it would be, but it's illegal. Yeah, whether you call it a crime.
Right. So now we're getting to the gray area here, which is
it's it is more of a humanitarian crisis. Gaza Strip is more of a war or terrorist act, but I don't know. That's a weird one because.
So you said you still lean on the side of Israel. So what's your view on Israelis moving into the West Bank and sort of?
Because who owns the West Bank now?
Well, look, under the Oslo Accords, it's still mostly Israeli controlled.
So then why aren't they allowed to bring it? Why aren't they allowed to bring Israelis in there?
Sorry, the only two things I have in my notes here is that under the Oslo Accords. Under the Oslo Accords, most of the West Bank is still under Israeli control. Maybe
the settlements are in the other areas. That's the issue. Is that maybe what the illegal thing is, or is it the West Bank in general? Because that doesn't make sense otherwise.
I know what you're saying.
This could be a gap in our knowledge. This is allowed to be a gap in our knowledge. If we have
it's complicated. It's complicated.
It is complicated.
Right? I would say what I do know is that the international community considers these Israeli settlements to be illegal.
Whatever the settlements are, if they're everywhere in the West Bank or in the certain zones or something, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, what's your view on that? On Israel kind of just refusing to leave the West Bank alone?
Well, I'd want to know more about the Oslo Accords than I do to even give a definite opinion, right? Because if they own the West Bank and they're moving extra citizens into areas they own, I don't see that as a problem. But if they are supposed to say, all right, these green areas on that map you were saying, like this is for Palestinians, then they shouldn't be moving in there freely. That was supposed to be a peace. I'm sure that would not peace, but it's an effort of making peace. Right. Whatever that effort is, then you should respect that, and that's doing what Egypt did, right, with the blockade again. Like you made it, whatever that accord states, you need to stick to that.
Regardless of what the accords agreed upon, though, I do believe it's kind of Jewish people have a historical connection to the area. Yeah. Right. So.
Yeah.
If Jewish people want to move into the West Bank, you can make a historical case for that.
Yeah.
But if the territory was Palestinian to begin with, and Israel continually insists on moving its citizens in there and creating security checkpoints, walls, I don't think. I think that's too aggressive. Right?
Yeah.
Like you have to. If you really want a two-state solution, you have to just leave Palestine alone.
Yeah.
Right? And if we're talking about the West Bank, where terrorism and extremism isn't as bad,
test it out there, figure it out there. You're saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. This all just reminds me of another element they can throw into it. And I think the best way is to bring up this example. Ben Shapiro had that Ariel Gold or something. They talked for a few minutes, and Ariel Gold is very like I think that's her name. That might not be her name. She wears like all pink. She's part of like Co-Pink or something like that. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Okay, it's a 3-minute video. Can we pause this podcast? I want to show you the video, and this will explain the point really clearly.
Okay. For some context, is she Palestinian or
She will not admit that Hamas is a terrorist group.
Ooh.
And she thinks that there should be military blockades or military sanctions on Israel.
Does Ben Shapiro destroy her?
Yeah, she starts laughing at her because she ends it with, these aren't extreme views, and he just starts laughing, and he's like, what are you talking? Because she says that we should lift all sanctions. We should be isolationist to a degree, and us being states, right? We should be isolationist to a degree. We should lift sanctions on Venezuela, which is already contradicting. Let's be isolationist. Let's lift. Then she's like, there should be no sanctions on anything. I'm like, well, that's sort of anti-isolationist.
Is she actually Palestinian, or is she just some stupid?
But then she said, that's that. Yeah. Okay, let's pause it. Let's pause it. Yeah, okay. Because that's going to describe a point too.
Okay, pausing video. Okay, we're back.
Okay, so we just watched the 9-minute video.
Yeah.
You guys can watch it too for context here. But it is a very, it's a Ben Shapiro, whatever your opinions are on him, debating not really debating, interviewing kind of.
Kind of an interview.
A anti-military, anti-Jewish state Israel.
Yeah, let's try to keep... the podcast was a lot, or the interview was a lot. Let's try to keep it to that.
That's kind of what, I'm saying,
for sure.
So what she brought up is, Ben Shapiro asked, do you believe that Israel should exist as a Jewish state? And she said she doesn't think so because that's holding up one people above another.
Right.
So there's two kind of issues with that I have. One would be, why are we targeting Israel? Because, like I said to you, maybe there's an answer to this, but what makes Israel more of a Jewish state than a neighboring country is a Muslim state? Or Islamic
Look, Saudi Arabia is a Muslim state.
Yeah. So why aren't we putting military sanctions on them? Right? Like, or not, why aren't we, but why shouldn't we be?
I mean, like, the situation is different. Obviously. Sure. Like, you don't have a group of Jewish people in Saudi Arabia being occupied. Yeah. But the idea that Israel should exist as a Jewish state you're right in saying there's no difference between that and having Saudi Arabia exist as an Islamic state.
Yeah.
There's no difference, right? And I think Jewish people, all things considered, have had a pretty hard time in the last few thousand years, right? So are they entitled to a state? Of course they are.
Yeah.
You know, is it shitty that the state that they're entitled to is, like we said earlier, the most heavily contested region of the planet?
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but do they have the right to exist as a state? I believe so.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and this is the other thing too, is people that say they don't, I feel like a lot of that is imparting our Western beliefs and what we have as Western rights on other nations that don't necessarily want that. You know what I mean? Like, maybe in the Middle East, I'm not saying they do, I'm not saying, but I think it shows a bigger problem, right? It's them saying, no, because there shouldn't be a Jewish state. We in North America don't think there should be a Jewish state, therefore we should put sanctions and force that to stop existing. But what if that is required or even desired,
right,
or wanted? Why are we should be supporting, you have to be unbiased, not only Palestine versus Israel, we have to be unbiased of our rights or our desires and our freedoms versus what they want.
Especially if you're not Palestinian or Jewish. Like, man, the amount of virtue signaling coming from these freaking people is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, you have no connection to the conflict whatsoever, right? You're living on the other end of the planet.
You pay to go get a back massage. You have to worry about getting shot up or bombed, right?
You're not Palestinian. You're not Jewish. You have no dog in this fight. I think people like that have a responsibility when they're talking about this conflict to try to be as impartial as possible and try to get their information from as unbiased of sources as possible. Yeah, totally. Because it's like, oh man, can we talk about the fucking, what are they called? Do you know Queers for Palestine? Have you heard about this? Have you heard about
I've
this?
Heard of it.
Of all of the batshit stupid movements to come out of the progressive left, this takes the cake, man. This takes the cake. And like, I'm not overly conservative. I'm pretty centrist. We both know that. But like, holy fuck, man.
So what is it exactly? Rant to me.
This movement embodies virtue signaling, man. Look, it's basically a group that takes two issues and puts them together. Two issues that have nothing to do with each other, and puts them together because the people part of this group want to make it seem like they're good people. Yeah. And that's the definition of virtue signaling, totally. Right? It's like look, being pro-Palestinian is fine. There are lots of very good reasons to be pro-Palestinian, right? To take a hard stance on that.
Yeah.
Being for queer rights is fine. Being for LGBT rights is fine. Yeah. Plenty of good reasons to take a hard stance on that. Mixing them together for no reason other than to make you seem like a good person is ridiculous. Yeah. Not only is it stupid, but it's counterproductive too. Why? Because Palestine is a deeply socially conservative state. Right? Yeah. They don't want the support of a bunch of queers. Yeah. Right? And I'm not shitting on queers here. No. I have
or Palestine.
Friends,
that's the thing. Yeah.
But it's like, why? Why are you doing this? You're. If you didn't bring gender into this issue, they would be way more open to accepting your support, as opposed to if you bring an issue into this that has nothing to do with the conflict, and the issue you're bringing into it is something that. Well, morally speaking, they're against. Like, that just doesn't make any fucking sense.
Remember about a year ago when all the companies were like said like, I support Palestine or something like that? Wasn't like, remember whole like companies were doing that?
One sec. Okay. We're gonna pause.
Okay, sorry about that. So no, I was saying, remember about a year ago when a bunch of like companies and websites were saying like, I support Palestine or something like that? Like there was this big thing. And like the like social justice warrior or whatever you want to call them, the peace, like whatever this, they were like strong-arming companies that refused to do that. Because there was companies that would say like, the situation's a lot more complex, we don't want to make any statements supporting one side or the other. Right. And like, they were being boycotted until they were forced to show support for Palestine.
Look, what are they doing? They're staying neutral. They're staying impartial, right? They're not. It's not like they're picking Israel's side, right? They're staying impartial. And if that is cause for you to lose your mind, then like go to hell, man.
I don't know if IGN was one of them. I think it was. I think really? IGN. It's like it's not the job of IGN to have a political statement about something going on in, like I said, the world's most complex geopolitical situation ever.
Yeah.
It's not the job of guys that write about video games to be making a stance on that. It's not. It's not. You're allowed opinions and you're allowed to discuss those opinions, but it's not their job to be blindly making a stance on something that they have no idea what they're talking about. And they don't. We don't have any idea what we're talking about.
Barely, yeah.
Barely, right?
Like, you know what I mean, 8 hours of fucking research.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, one thing I wanted to say too was, you mentioned Palestine won't want the support of queers, you were saying, essentially, right? And they don't, like, based on their social structure.
Yeah, look, okay,
right?
what
it was a joke.
What I said was not in, look, I'm pro LGBTQ, but,
yeah,
you know, the point I'm trying to make is that if you want to support Palestine, that's fine.
But be aware.
Well, don't bring in another issue that has nothing to do with the conflict that would put the Palestinians you're trying to support in opposition to you.
It's undermining the support you're trying to give.
Yeah,
kind of, right?
It's making it kind of like more difficult for them to accept your support. So why would you do it? Like, if you want to support Palestine. But why would you do it in a way that intentionally or inevitably makes them more skeptical of your support?
So this is the thing.
Makes sense.
There's people saying we don't. Like her thing, she doesn't believe in a Jewish state because she believes that everyone should be treated equally. Mm-hmm. Okay, so look at the competition. Let's look at the like. I'm not, and this isn't me. The next few sentences aren't me trying to insult, right? But like the idea that, okay, let's look at the Islamic State that you're trying to, like, or not the Palestine. You're talking about people that women aren't allowed to vote, or whatever, and don't have nearly the same standing as males. Mm-hmm. People that are very anti-LGBT, most anti-LGBT. Why is Israel the bad guy when it comes to being equal?
So that's a really good point. What I'm going to say is, I think a lot of Western progressive supporters of Palestine have kind of a conflict that they have to deal with for themselves, because the thing with Israel, right?
Yeah.
Israel acts as the beacon of socially progressive rights in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Right? Every country surrounding them, and Palestine, right? Deeply conservative states, deeply socially conservative states, right?
Yeah.
I mean...
And that's putting it lightly, because it's not socially conservative like how we think of conservative.
As in, like, gay people are criminals.
You're talking conservative in a completely different sense, right? Like, it's apples and oranges. It's
right.
almost unfair to compare those to the Conservative Party of the last 100 years here in Canada, yeah.
So it's like, you know, people say, like, you know, like, Israel has one of the biggest pride parades in the world. Let's say that, right?
Yeah.
It's not only that it has the biggest pride parade in the world, it's that it has the only pride parade in that entire region of the world. Yeah. And that if you are someone who supports socially progressive rights for people, and you don't support those people being oppressed by regimes, you have to some extent appreciate what Israel represents in that region of the world. And if you take the side of Hamas and you advocate for their complete destruction,
then you're advocating for a return of, by default, indirectly, you're advocating for a return of complete, segregation is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, splitting of male and female rights. And
you're advocating for getting rid of the one beacon towards socially progressive rights that there exists in the Middle East, and that's important. I think that is something that a lot of pro-Palestinian Western progressives won't admit, because it's an incredibly inconvenient fact for them.
And in a lot of ways more progressive than we are. Women and males both are treated equally in the military and everything like that. Like,
for sure.
Probably to the point where progressive, where a lot of people don't want it to be that progressive. No one wants to be conscripted into the military necessarily, but like, in some ways, like, very, and in some other, I'm sure, I don't know, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I'm sure in some ways that aren't as socially progressive as the States or Canada or anything.
Well, no country's perfect,
sure, right? But that's not the point.
But in comparison to the rest of the region around them, like,
and the point is like I said, it's us forcing our belief system on them, right? Like, if there are slight discrepancies in social values, that's allowed. That's not necessarily a bad thing,
right?
For instance, them saying that men and women should both join the military. You can't criticize that as a bad thing. I don't think you can also criticize the assumption that men are the ones that join the military in North America, because there's a lot of forced gender roles. The women are the pregnant. Like, right, there are limitations to having a conscript for women. Mm-hmm. If they're pregnant, what do you do? If you have a brand new kid, the woman like a 3-month-old, a woman is able to provide a lot more nurturing than a male is, just due to like breastfeeding, even, right, and stuff like that. So there are social values that we shouldn't be necessarily pushing on other countries. We shouldn't, especially in the countries across the world, right? But it depends on what those people. You have to look at what the people of that country want, right? And so this is kind of unrelated, I guess, to that argument, but it's the argument that these people that are anti-Israel are just forcing what we think should be upon them. And I think things are a lot more complex than that too, like you were saying. It's the Western world needs to take our Western biases out of it too.
Right.
And realize what's going on there. And at the same time, also realize that if you want to talk about social justice, talk about one of the biggest hubs of social injustice. Right? Yeah. I don't know. It's such a complex situation. And you're right that they have a giant conflict of interest that they have to somehow rationalize in their head.
Yeah, right. I mean,
especially
if you're a progressive, like I said, who takes the hardline stance of fuck it, like not saying that Israel should be a state.
Yeah,
it's like that's a serious problem there because. What happens to all the LGBT people who are now persecuted in the Middle East? Where do they go, right? Like if you're in Saudi Arabia and being gay is a criminal, and you want to leave, and you can't just hop on a plane and fly to the West, what's the next best place to go? Israel, right? Yeah. And that's like it acts as a refuge for the entire Middle East, right? And you can't.
Yeah.
If you care about socially progressive rights. You can't at the same time advocate for the complete eradication of Israel.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
Right?
No. It's, I think we 100% agree there. Yeah. So, I think, okay, is there anything else in this conversation? Is there more we want to discuss?
No, I just wanted to rant about Cures for Palestine.
Fair. That's fair.
That was all.
So now that we've hit this point then, do you think you're more or less pro one or the other now, or where do you think your opinions are now?
I mean, it's still a gray area. I still don't want to pick a side because, like we just admitted, we don't know a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think I know enough about it, and I don't think I have enough personal experience. From it to pick a side.
I would say compared to the average person, what's the best way of wording this? Compared to the average voice you hear in the Western world, which you're hearing a lot of movement about this pro-Palestine, right? I would say I tend to lean more Israel than them.
I would say if I had to pick a lean, it would be Israel.
Yeah.
If I had to pick
even
a
the point
lean,
you made about them being a beacon of like some level, they're the closest to Western values that we have.
That's important. I mean, even if we're just talking about the interactions between Israel and Palestine, what Israel is doing is illegal. It fits some definition of apartheid. I'm not going to deny that. It is against a lot of UN policies, right? But is Israel as a state, I believe, has a right to exist. And if they have been constantly under threat by almost everyone around them since their inception.
Yeah.
And that is...
The fact they're still there, whether we want them to or not, the fact they're still there is a miracle all on its own.
Right.
That they did go toe-to-toe against the combined forces of the Middle East.
Yeah.
In 6 days,
Yeah, for sure.
I would lean Israel, yeah.
For me, the lean is slight.
That's not saying that they are politically as white as snow. Like, they're not pure, right? Like, the saying, they're not, they have red. They have red on their hands, right?
Yeah, they have blood on their hands, for sure. Yeah, no, and it's... Yeah. And so I guess
they're not... Yeah, sorry.
I would... Yeah, I don't know. It's tricky, man. It's tricky. I'm definitely anti-Hamas.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I'm not for committing acts of terrorism, no matter the situation.
Yeah.
It's important. I think it's important here to point out it's not just Israel that's imposing a blockade on Gaza. It's Egypt as well. Yeah. It's the other country that shares a border with Gaza.
Countries that have been at war with each other quite historically
can agree that this area, that Gaza, deserves, to some extent, or that Gaza requires some economic restrictions.
Yeah.
Right. So it's complicated now. If we're looking at the West Bank, if we're talking about the West Bank, I would lean more. And again, I don't know that much about it. I really don't. Maybe I would lean, in principle, maybe I would lean more towards the side of Palestine to say, like, okay, Israel, I know you have a historical claim to the land, but like, you have effectively all of Jerusalem.
And whatever
you have most of the Levant. Maybe just for the sake of peace, leave the West Bank alone.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm assuming part of the issue with that is how close it is to Jerusalem, though. I'm assuming that's
it's in Jerusalem is in the West Bank.
Yeah.
It's in the West Bank, right? And
yeah.
Like, Jerusalem, like I said, it's at the center of this entire conflict, right?
But I guess one other thing I want to say really quick, too. The original plan for Jerusalem, does that sound a whole lot like the whole Berlin situation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We know how that it seems kind of like a carbon copy of it, actually.
That's what they wanted. They said you could split it in half, kind of essentially make it an international city.
Yeah.
And
we all know how that ended for Berlin, right?
Yeah.
So, obviously, the obvious difference being, I think everyone in Berlin kind of wanted that wall to come down, whereas I feel like a lot of people in Jerusalem are not okay with the wall being up, but okay with
already half of it at least
being on a side.
Yeah, being on a side.
Picking a side.
Differences, but weirdly, there's a lot there. I would imagine history would have repeated itself, kind of in some sense.
Yeah, for sure.
And that would have been a short-lived
solution. There was one more thing I wanted to get to. Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Sure, take it.
Yeah. You had nothing else?
Nothing that comes to mind. I'll jump on it, though.
Okay. So what are your thoughts of Trump in, I think, 2018, moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv? What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, where is Tel Aviv?
Tel Aviv is on the coast, I think it's northwest of Jerusalem. Okay. Yeah. So Tel Aviv is like the big Israeli city. That's where. Look, so the situation is right. Sorry, let me go through my notes here. So, in 1980, the United Nations rejected Israel's claim that an undivided Jerusalem was the capital of Israel.
Yeah.
As a result, all countries keep their embassies in Tel Aviv to remain neutral. So,
I see.
So the Palestinian opposition to Trump moving the embassy to Jerusalem was that you're signifying that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel.
Yeah.
Right? Now, my understanding is at a diplomatic level, most countries de facto treat Jerusalem as Israel's capital. They conduct a lot of their diplomatic stuff there anyway. But symbolically and for the sake of remaining neutral, they keep their embassies in Tel Aviv to not make it seem like they're alluding to the idea that Israel is the capital of Jerusalem, and it's not. It's not a divided city between Israel and Palestine.
Yeah.
Right. So when the Oslo Accords were signed in '93.
Yeah.
No. Sorry. Okay. Nothing to do. In response to the Oslo Accords, I have in my notes here. Pro-Israel lobby groups in the U.S. got legislation passed that required the U.S. Embassy to be in Jerusalem. Right? These are lobby groups that
really, and they got passed.
That's kind of scary. It's kind of scary, right? But this included a waiver that presidents could sign that would postpone the enforcement of this law by 6 months. So every president since Clinton has continually signed the waiver every 6 months to keep the embassy in Tel Aviv. Trump signed it until 2 years into his presidency, and then halfway through, he decides to not sign it.
I wouldn't be surprised if he just forgot to sign it or something and pretended it to be some sort of...
Look, there's speculation. There's speculation here. The compelling argument I've heard is that 2018 is around the time that Trump really started to lose popularity in the polls.
Yeah.
So people have theorized that the reason he made this embassy move official was to appease his evangelical base and try to
Yeah.
gain more votes,
Yeah.
which that's a scary thing too, right? Because now you have a U.S. politician who is actively destabilizing peace in a very hot region for the purpose of gaining votes as a self-serving thing.
Yeah.
It's a scary precedent, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now that I've explained the situation to you, what's your take on it?
I don't think it's a... I gotta be careful. I don't think it's a bad thing to do, but those reasons are scary, I agree with.
So,
right?
So you are okay with acknowledging Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and as an undivided city?
That's the thing.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the tricky, because
that was never... Well, like we said, the original suggestion was a divided city.
A divided city, yeah.
That was voted against by the Arab population. Whatever that...
Palestinian.
No, but it was the Arab... The total...
Oh, you're talking about the
UN thing.
After World War
after World War II. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So then Israel said, fine, I'll do it myself, essentially, right? And
okay.
did that. Now, I don't know, because Jerusalem's considered a holy city to the Palestinians.
Yeah.
Too.
It's considered, like I said, it's all three Abrahamic religions consider it to be a holy city. Yeah. So now, East Jerusalem is considered not just by Palestinians but by the international community to be part of Palestine and to be an area that Israel is occupying.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're acknowledging that Jerusalem is one, an undivided city, and two, the capital of Israel, not Palestine, you are delegitimizing Palestine's claim to East Jerusalem.
So, I wonder, and this is more symbolic, I guess, too, which is kind of a counter argument to me. But are you allowed to have there's no example of this to really compare to. Are you allowed to have a capital city? Because if Jerusalem's a city, are you allowed to have the capital be the part of it that's on your side?
Well, effectively, that's how it works.
But can you logistically imagine Ottawa grows and spreads and gets so close that's touching borders with Detroit?
Mm-hmm. Well,
Ottawa
Detroit?
can still...
You mean Quebec?
No. A U.S.
Ottawa's
city.
Pretty far from the U.S. Man.
Sure.
What do you mean? Toronto?
I'm trying to... No, I'm pretending...
straight here,
No. I'm trying to make an example in my head where, a capital would spread south. The capital spreading south.
Okay,
Ottawa, Toronto, 50 years in the future, they've merged into some big one, and they've merged, and they're now mingling with Detroit on the border.
Okay.
You can still have Ottawa be your capital.
That's how it works in Jerusalem with Israel. Israel has all of its legislative buildings in Jerusalem, on the west side of Jerusalem. So they treat Jerusalem as its capital, practically speaking. It's just international recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital is... You want to be careful about that, because now you're, by delegitimizing Palestine's claim to East Jerusalem, you're now stoking fire.
Does it have to legitimately be legitimizing? Can you still have like I said, can the capital be West Jerusalem?
It's a symbolic thing.
But it's symbolic, which is
when
what
you
it comes
say
down to.
Jerusalem, you're implying it's all of Jerusalem, which includes the east part that's, according to the UN, being occupied.
It is compelling, and it isn't a compelling idea as a sign of peace, hypothetically, right? Like this is completely if Israel and Palestine were effectively able to say, okay, the West Bank is Palestine. We'll share Jerusalem as it's the capital of both of our countries, and have the West versus East, right? Like the West of it be the...
Okay.
It's a compelling thought.
It's a compelling thought.
Yeah, it's a gesture of peace and goodwill.
Here's the thing. You would have to hyphenate Jerusalem in some way.
You'd have to have East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem.
Right, and that's how you would have to refer to it legally, which would be... In my opinion, that would kind of take away from the significance of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Right? Because, like we said...
Or that add to the significance that it is that peace. It is like a olive branch. Like, it would add a different significance.
Sure, maybe.
It would be... Or the idea of an international city is compelling. If it doesn't turn into Berlin, that, I think, shows that's almost like a Vatican type situation. Like, Vatican state kind of, Vatican's its own entity. That, Jerusalem being its own entity. But I don't know how you'd govern that if that's just a mayor. If you have you'd have to have to have security guarantees by both sides. You'd have to have economic trade. You'd have to have like a zero tariff trade between both sides. Like you'd have to have something. It'd be complex.
Dude, you could make it work, but I don't think it's possible.
It's a compelling idea.
I think Israel is too aggressively expansionist, and I think Palestine as well to an extent. Is more. They
both want all of it.
Right. And it's like at the very least, they both want their sides. Like they both want all of Jerusalem, but at the very least, they both want their sides, right? So I think it's a rosy idea, but I just in practice, I don't think that would work at all.
Like I think
Jerusalem is just going to have to exist for the rest of human religious history as just the most complicated city.
Yeah.
And probably the most culturally and religiously significant city in the history of the human race. And
totally, yeah.
There's just nothing you can do about that. It's like how do you figure out? I don't know, man. How do you figure out how to govern the city of God? Right? Like it just the idea of that it just makes.
Do you know how unreal it would be to travel over there for like a month?
It'd be cool.
Even you, an agnostic or whatever you want.
As someone who isn't Christian, I would say. Walking around Old Town Jerusalem, walking around an area where I know for a fact, and everyone knows for a fact, that Christ walked through 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. And just the history, the history there.
Yeah. Right. It'd be cool. I would love to go to Jerusalem.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's all the famous, like the map, you can see like Mount Sinai and all that, and all the famous.
Yeah.
Like
well, there's the Temple Mount, right?
Temple Mount.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah.
So worth mentioning. Actually, we're going to talk about Temple Mount. Temple Mount is in East Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So, Israel has control of who enters Temple Mount. They have sort of the control of the security inside it, but Palestine and Muslims have control of religious actions within Temple Mount. So what that means is Jewish people can enter the Temple Mount, but they can't pray. And this is part of the agreement between Israel and Palestine. It's like Israel can control who goes in and who goes out, but Palestine and Muslims control the religious activities that happen inside. So as a result of that, the holy site that Jews have is the Western Wall, which is like, I guess, just outside of the Temple Mount. And that's what they can, like the Western Wall to Jews is like the holiest site in Judaism. So they go there to pray. They can go into Temple Mount, but they can't pray there. They have to go to the Western Wall.
Okay, it's kind of potentially a stupid question.
No,
what's this? Is there significance to Temple Mount to Islamic religion?
So it's I have it here.
Okay.
So there's three things that's part of the Temple Mount. One is the Dome of the Rock, which is actually, it has shared significance between Judaism and Islam. The Dome of the Rock is the one with the big yellow dome, right? In Islam, that's where Muhammad ascended to heaven, or began his ascent to heaven, and that's also where Abraham sacrificed his son, or tried to sacrifice.
I think it's tried,
tried to sacrifice his son.
Yeah.
So the Dome of the Rock has significance in both religions.
Yeah.
The Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is also in Temple Mount, is the third holiest site in Islam, and then the Western Wall, which is the remnant of the old wall that surrounded Temple Mount, is the holiest site in Judaism, and that's where Jews are allowed to go pray, because it's technically
on the west side, I guess,
or outside of it.
Outside,
So So it's the Temple Mount has religious significance in both. Both religions. So
it's not a case of it is to one and the other side saying screw you, we're not going to let you use it. It's not that simple.
I don't know the details behind it. Is that a compromise? Like, is a compromise to say that Muslims have control over the religious ceremonies within it, but Israel can control its security? I don't know. I'm not sure. If
is that like? Does that say that like Israel can say no Muslims are allowed in? I guess they have the ability to if Islam's rules or whatever Palestine's rules, whoever controls it puts harsh rules on Israel, then Israel partials back.
I guess so. But again, you're talking about like one of the most religiously significant sites in history. Yeah. Probably on the face of the planet.
I also want to clarify.
Are you really going to restrict it?
If we're mixing up Arab, Muslim, Islam, and Palestine in these words, forgive us both.
It's a
lot, right?
Yeah.
They're all slightly different. Yeah, that means substantially different in some cases, but yeah.
Okay. We're at an hour and a half here.
Well, that's pretty good.
Do you want to wrap that up?
I thought we were going to go a little longer, honestly. But I don't know what else there is to talk about.
I don't think there's much else to talk about. I think we kind of hit everything that
Hamas
we could talk
terrorists.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's...
Should we wrap it up?
Yeah.
Or do you have something else you want to say?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This
is the Art of Podcast.
Yeah.
Did you have something else you wanted to say?
I was going to say, like, what's been happening in the news lately? There's, like, just civilian casualties. I say just. I don't want to sound disregarding, but, like, civilian casualties recently have been happening. I know Israel supporting Ukraine.
Okay, I don't know anything about that.
I don't need to go too far because I'm going to run out of info pretty quick. But
right.
Yeah, then like Putin said something about Hitler being a Jew and one of his like foreign ministers did, and then Putin sent out an apology to Israel about that or something like that. Yeah.
Right.
It's weird how Israel, even like countries like Russia and stuff, are like holding a significant, whether they're against Israel or not, like there is importance to that area.
Mm-hmm. Right, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, that's it. Thanks for tuning in to the Art of Podcast.
Ciao for now.